From his hillside perch, Adam could not have said what kind of stadium it was. Rugby, cricket, football, it was all a much of muchness when the sun glowered pink and gold at the horizon and the crowds had seeped in tallow streaks to their gutters. He watched them run, a fat, white caterpillar disgorging itself from the largest of the archway exits, speckled with red faces. Whether the flush was from rage or drink hardly mattered. That night, as every night, the city would be awash in laughing storms wearing sweat-stained polos. As he watched them go, he thought of the halls they had abandoned, the unspeakable things left to congeal in their wake. His lip curled. And these are good shoes too, he thought, bitterly. Then, with a final, guttural sigh, Adam began to walk. The crowd had waned by the time he reached the main doors, the last handful of pale faces scattering in the twilight cold like billiards. He glanced up at the sunlight glinting across the face of the great glass entryway. A banner hung from its apex. Our team, our heart, our home, it read, in a garish yellow, made uglier by the sun's glare at its seams. His gaze lingered a moment, allowing the sunbeams to paint their dark stars. Then he blinked them away and strode through the door. It was somehow colder inside. The reception area was all slate and marble, a narrow welcome desk sitting sentinel at its core. Grey pillars stood in scattershot legions, leering toothily, threaded through with spiderweb plaque. He saw hoarfrost creeping along the strands. It dyed them an electric blue. He shivered. Adam, yeah? He turned. From a door to his left stepped a large man in a cream collared shirt. A wide face was matched by a wider mouth, small, pale teeth flickering like starlight as he strode. Saw you making your way from my office. You're early, mate. I like that. A hand the size of a tenderloin and half again as thick jackknifed the air and hung in the space between them. A moment passed. Then Adam took it, and the man's grin widened. Strong, he said, nodding to himself. Strong grip. I like it. You're... Adam began. Sam, man, Sam, he cut in. Then Sam whipped back his hand and pointed it to his chest, where a small enamel pin glittered amidst the folds. Sam Samuels, security head, it read. In case you need a reminder, eh? He winked as his grin grew somehow wider. Adam was beginning to find the habit disquieting. Nice to... he began, but already Sam was whirling with long, powerful strides that had him beside a glass access door before Adam could blink. Let's get this started, he called back as Adam scrabbled to follow him deeper into the complex. Behind them, the last of the daylight faltered, and with it, the last of the gold. For long moments the hall was an abyssal, angular thing. Shadows hung like storm clouds from the rafters, leaking black resin that pooled thick as tar about their feet. It was only when he began to fear losing Sam's shape in the dark that the lights snapped on with a hiss. He winced, Their harshness was its own kind of blinding. Already the first itchy needles of a migraine were worrying behind his eyes. "So," Sam shouted. Or maybe he didn't. The walls had a way of twisting every whisper into a scream. "The job's simple enough. Gates are locked already by the day shift, main areas checked for drunks and stragglers. We're real thorough too." He paused, then gestured to a nearby bin, purple tinged with scabbing grime. "Well, we are now. Found a guy in there once, would you believe? Wasn't even a match day." The laughter that followed was ear-shattering. Adam fought not to clap his hands about his head. "I'll keep an eye out, sir." "Sir?" Another laugh. "No sirs here, mate." A smile sharp as a whip split the gloom. "Just us. Me and you." This time he clapped a hand on Adam's shoulder as he chuckled. He was grateful for that. It hid the shudder that ran through him. Adam watched him laugh. The man wasn't fat so much as round. A wide, flat head sat atop an undefined bulk of loose-fitting clothes. His hair was short and stiff, the colour of burnt toast and flaked through with cornflake dandruff. And he had the strangest sense of mass about him. Not so much walking as gyrating, like a half-deflated mascot suit. Only his arms broke the mould, thin and reedy, with broad hands flexing at their ends like great fat spiders suspended in their silk. There was something so familiar about the look of him that for a moment Adam failed to place. Then it clicked. A snowman, built of the guttering winter powder his father would scrounge for his play. He wondered, idly, what would happen if he plucked the name tag from the man's chest. Maybe he would just fall to slurry, like Frosty without his magic hat. The thought tugged his lips into a thin smile. Sam took it for encouragement. He clapped once, loudly, and rubbed his hands together. "All right, on with the tour." The next hour was a haze of steel and stone. Halls begat halls begat halls. Some were long, others short, others still crowded with boxes he doubted anyone could name the contents of anymore. Might have a few more lost patrons sectioned away in here, he thought, gazing up at a particularly dizzying pile of half-rotten crates, nickling in their cardboard graves. The smell was rank enough for it. Mildew grew on their every misting breath, and he could all but feel spores taking root in his palate. He would have spat, had he not feared seeing sproutlings in the phlegm. "So what am I looking out for?" Adam asked, and immediately felt stupid. But Sam had said little and less of any substance as they trudged. Chatter and anecdote as thick as the mold stink curled soporifically through the air. Sam frowned. "Well," he muttered, "looking for? Nothing, ideally. We don't keep anything on site after hours, so the only thieves you'll see are either lost or thick. Sometimes get kids, armed with spray cans, but it's term time for the little prats, so you're not like to get them either. There's mites in the flooring, rats in the ducts. Other than that, sounds like you could have saved the £11 an hour." He had meant it as a joke, but for an instant something flashed across the big man's face, like the shadow of a kestrel in a field mouse eye. "That eager to talk yourself out of a job, mate?" Sam smiled. On anyone else it would have seemed manic, but for Sam it was almost a grimace. "It's for the insurance. Need someone to do a circuit every few hours, sign off at the end of the night. Could just pay the higher premiums. but they're a little bit more than 11 quid an hour. If you can manage, that is. A flush crept across his cheeks. Yeah, he muttered. No problem. The shadow passed as quickly as it formed, and Sam's smile was strung anew. No problem, he echoed. The halls echoed with him. I'll say we wrap this up, yeah? You'll be wanting to get on with it. He took a few short strides to a section of the wall that at first glance seemed as unmarked as the rest. Then came a crack and squeal as Sam pulled at some unseen latch and a door swung open. He disappeared inside. Adam followed. It was an office. Barely. A paltry little alcove, so tight that Adam wondered if he shouldn't keep a half step out into the hall. But that felt wrong, somehow. Like having feet on the decks of opposing ships. Inside, hewn concrete gave way to what might once have been oaken planks. Now, the dark wood had splintered into something partway between driftwood and sawdust. The edges that sat beneath the doorframe in particular looked to have been worried at by iron teeth. Man-made, he thought as he took in the jaggedness of the place, then shook his head. What do I mean, man-made? This here's your office, Sam cut in, derailing the thought. Some of the lads call it the sphincter. Couldn't tell you why, though. He turned, almost gutting himself on a shelf bracket in the attempt. Over here, he crooked a finger to the far end of the room, where a yellowing monitor sat dead. The eyes. Don't have many cameras up anymore, but from here you get a good look at the front doors, the back, and a few spots over the pitch. Not super useful, unless you're into watching pigeons repaint the try lines, but better than nothing, yeah? Adam nodded. He dare not speak. The air was thick, laden with the smell of electrical fire and boiling brass. Already he could taste sweet sour acid pooling at the back of his throat. If I vomit in here, we're like to drown. Sam seemed unperturbed. He waved a fat white hand over the keyboard, instantly thickening the smell as some ancient fan's word unseen. The monitor blinked, winked, sparked, spots of starlight growing larger with every shuddering breath it took. It's gonna blow, Adam thought with a sudden certainty. We're going to burn. Eventually the device calmed, but it felt like a near thing. Some juddering life caught in the black, and suddenly he was looking at a mosaic of the building in grayscale, carved of shadows so deep they could have been woodcuts. Like finding Vegemite in a septic tank, innit? Sam laughed, rapping a nail against the display. It flickered for a moment with an angry hiss of static. When the picture faded back in, however, something had changed. Who's that? He asked, and pointed. Where once there had been an empty window pane, malformed by lag and snow, a figure now stood. Human, though filtered as it was difficult to tell. Tin soldier limbs jut and snapped as the frames flickered, tore. Are they waving? Sam froze. For a long moment, the space seemed somehow even smaller. Oh, he grunted. Her. The final stretch of the circuit led them to open sky, gravel floors, and shuttered food trucks standing cold as cenotaphs. Night had truly fallen. The air was black and textured, mist deepening the shades darker yet darker. Lampposts ran the length of the courtyard, lightless. eyeless. "Didn't think she'd show her face here again," said Sam as they neared the archway leading back into the stadium. "Not after last time." Last time? The words smoked from his lips. "She's a head case, mate. Kept knocking at that same window every night for weeks. Scared the lad before you half to death the first time. Then it just got tedious. Had half a mind to leave her to it. She's obviously on one. Until... You see the boarded door on your way in?" Adam thought back. "Yes," he said, finally. "She did that. Her and a great bloody pickaxe." Sam shook his head. "Should have seen it. Still can't believe she could lift the damn thing, let alone swing it. Guard found her on the pitch, hacking away at the turf with a trail of splinters and plaster dust behind her. Broke his nose when he tried to stop her." Christ. It was all he could think to say. They crossed the threshold, and the familiar hum of fluorescence once again buzzed about them. The wind faded as they entered, but not the cold. Never that. At the far end of the tunnel, a row of windows sat, slick with moonlight. It was in one of these the woman stood. She was a frail thing. Even in the murk, that much was clear. Her cheeks were hollow pits, yawning beneath sallow, watery eyes, shot through with the same red that tinged her peeling lips. Hair, black as crow's eyes, curled about her spine, clinging to the hem of a dark blue dress that may once have even fit. Now, however, it was lank as old skin, draped over bones that creaked visibly beneath translucent flesh. She raised an arm as they drew close, then let it fall. The motion was as rictus as it had seemed on the monitor. "Miss Reed," Sam called as they drew closer. "Miss Reed, you know you can't be here." Adam watched the woman's lips move, but whatever her replied was swallowed by the glass. When they were near enough to see the blood in her nail beds, he tried again. "Mary, you need to go." "Have you seen him?" She spoke so softly that Adam read the words more than he heard them. "Have you seen my James?" Sam sighed. "James isn't here." She ignored him. Instead, those pinprick pupils swiveled, found Adam's and caught. "He has the most brilliant green eyes," she said. "His father's. The colour of sweet grass in summer. So clear, so bright." "No," he stammered. "No, Her brow cracked into a frown, so severe he feared the muscles would snap. "Liar!" she snarled. "I heard him. The earth is too soft. You can't hide the screaming. You think you can stop me from..." Sam snapped the shutters closed. The cries of Miss Mary Reed died almost instantly, though even through the plastic Adam could feel her gaze. "Hell," Sam muttered to himself. "She's getting worse." He turned. "Listen, not ideal, I know, but I've got to sort this before I head home. Keys are in the office, Walkie is too, and..." What's she talking about? Again that dark flash touched Sam's lips. "Crap is what she's talking," he spat. "The boy came to watch a game a few months ago. His dad lost him in the crowd. It happens. Hell, if every parent of a missing kid hounded us like this, we'd..." He paused. Perhaps the echo of the hall had let him hear just what it was he was about to voice. Sweat coated his brow. Adam watched a globule trickle down behind his ear and into the pit of his nape. "Just... I'll deal with it, alright?" Get to work, he finished. Right. Suppose I'll see you tomorrow then, Adam answered. As he did, a look of such pure confusion settled in Sam's eyes that for a long moment he thought he had misspoken. Then it faded, like silt at high tide. Yeah. Tomorrow. The office seemed smaller again, shorter, tighter. Fresh splinters flowered like tundra grass between the hardwood planks, the dented cabinets only an arm's length apart. He could hardly believe Sam had ever fit. Next time I'll have to clock in on my hands and knees, he thought, as he made his way to the terminal. An office chair sat before it, its legs blackened and cracked like old kindling. He grasped its head to draw it back. Almost instantly the cloth face split, disgorging a wet, mouldy substance that may once have been padding. Revulsion struck like a dagger. He swore, fell back, and struck a low-hanging pipe. Skull met steel with a hollow thud that turned his bones to bedding. He slipped to his knees. "Oh, brilliant!" he cursed through grit teeth, clutching at his head. "Great start, well done, you... Oh!" When the ache had waned from a boil to a simmer, his eyes opened. A graze, thin as razor wire and ragged to the touch, swelled beneath the mop of his hair. Wincing, he brushed a finger across it and felt wetness. When he drew it back, however, there was nothing but sweat and oil. No blood. He brushed it again, harder this time, hot tears pricking as he made certain he had the right spot. This time there was blood, a light pinkish glaze, like red wine cut with rainwater. He frowned, stood. The pipe he had struck hung behind him, gurgling quietly with some liquid or other, thick as his tongue and coated in what he desperately hoped was not lead. It didn't seem to be anything he could have cut himself on, and the streaks were all blacks and browns, not a trace of red. Miracle, he thought, wincing. The only head wound ever not to ruin a shirt. He reached out, wondering if his fingers could find the splinter he couldn't see. An electrical crackle drew him short. He lurched back, thoughts of exposed wire spitting blue fire setting his heart to pounding. But no, it wasn't the pipe. It had come from behind. The walkie. Sam did mention the walkie. He chastised himself, then paused. But who's calling? He turned, listened. It came again, a sharp bark of static, followed by a long, low hiss. And something more. It was coming from the desk. A humiliating game of hot and cold followed, but eventually he found the source. A narrow drawer set just below the desk's lip. It opened without complaint, revealing something strange. Rather than the crusting meal of mold-addled leavings he had expected, someone had layered the wood. Silver steel sheets had been drilled across its every face, a ramshackle Faraday cage. The only thing inside was a radio. It seemed an ordinary thing, matte but for the shimmer of its holster. Gingerly, Adam reached for it. There was a murmur in the air within the drawer, hot and humming as a heartbeat. He picked it up. "Movement E7. The radio sparked, suddenly all a spit and crackle. He almost threw it. "E7, over." He fumbled for a moment, tracing the plastic until he found a ridged bump, It clicked to his touch, and the static went cold, awaiting his reply. As he opened his mouth to give it, his tongue sloughed from its roof with a wet snap. It was terribly, terribly dry. "Okay," he coughed. Yeah, okay, I'll check, but... Sorry, who is this?" He unthumbed the switch and paused. No answer came. "Hello? Who? Oh, I mean, over."
E7,
came the voice again, inhuman in the radio haze.
over.
E7, as it happened, was the rear of an eastern stand, squat as any other and laden with cobwebs thick as flax. The signage sat above a narrow gate with bars Adam was fairly sure he could snap with a finger, had withered to almost nothing. Flaking paint scrawls yawned to either side, their meaning weathered, lost. "Nothing's moved here for a long time," he said to no one but the spiders. Even they were still and crumbling in their webs, errant legs threaded along the strands like the parts of some disassembled machine. The only motion was the swaying of the light above, and the shadow of the 1,000 chitinous corpses it set to dancing with every flicker. He shuddered. The air had stilled as midnight came and passed. His breath was all that warmed the silence. That and the radio hum.
Movement, stockroom 4, over.
This time he didn't flinch. Though as the words echoed through the halls, he had to fight the urge to look behind him. Instead, he brought the radio to his lips. "Who is this?" When no answer came, he added, "Over."
Stockroom 4, over.
"Sam, is this you? What are you, 14? Enough with the bloody hazing and let me get on with things."
Stockroom 4, over.
No, not Sam. Somehow that didn't feel right. Adam worked his jaw, fighting the urge to scream. He had plied enough trades to know that would only encourage whoever it was that lay behind the static. A teenage gaggle, most like. Terrorizing minimum wages was what they had instead of prospects. Adam let his anger slack with his shoulders. Seemed to him he had a choice to make. Play along, pace and scrounge until the caller grew bored and felt their game concluded. Or he could slump into what remained of the office chair and pen the next great American novel. He sighed. Then he snapped the radio back into place on his belt. Where the hell was stockroom 4 again? The walk to the storage block seemed at once a minute and a mile. The seconds ticked in languid strokes with the passing stands. E9, E10, E11, F1, F2, on and on and on, until they seemed more pictograms on some ancient cliff face than words with any meaning. Without Sam, his only companions were the dozen or so posters that hung from the walls like corpses on gibbets. They were players, he guessed. All were tall, broad, swelling with muscle thick as cable, grinning beneath noses that had been shattered and set 100 times. Some utter wordsmith had taken a marker to a few, scrawling a series of crude words beside the gap-toothed smiles. They called out their silent curses as Adam passed, eyes flitting from within the plastic skin. He tried not to look. Finally, the stockrooms came into view. 4 wooden doors set 2 abreast either side of the hall, a drinking fountain rusting softly between. The sight of it brought back his thirst with a vengeance. but the orange crust at the spout gave him pause. He imagined the crinkle of it against his lips, the sour taste of copper and chalk, and decided it wouldn't help much. Instead, he made his way to the first of the doorways. Adam gripped it, then paused, listening. A deafening silence rang. "They could be waiting for you," something within him jeered. "Clutching pocket knives and shivs and daggers, oh my. Will they cut you? Will they kill you? Will you even care?" He opened the door. Like everywhere within the complex, the storage room had its own bespoke gloom, so it was the smell that struck him first. Thick and doughy, wet dog damp and swimming with rot. From the first he had tried his best to breathe through his mouth, but the air in here was thick enough to chew. It rasped against his teeth as he murmured his disgust. Willing himself not to taste, Adam raised a hand to his face to mask the worst of it, and focused his eyes. Slowly, so slowly, they chiseled some shape into the shadows. A few box towers tottered astride a murder of loose hats, shirts and trinkets of every kind. Their colours had been bleached in the dark and the damp. Reds and greens had faded to mulch, streaked a whitish yellow by fungal fingers. What floor could be glimpsed beneath was a mosaic of glinting silver chains, shackling long-forgotten mascot figures with mould-blackened smiles. Empty, he thought, moving to shut the door. One light guttered across the back wall as he shifted, and amongst the cardboard something shone. He took a half step into the room and propped the door open against one shoulder. Then, without ceremony, his eyes adjusted, peering back the dark like twin waxing moons. Oh, hell! A face looked back at him from between a stack of card. Stark white against the mud browns, its eyeless gaze caught his own in a vice of sudden terror. Hairless, bloodless, its lips pursed in a silent gasp, the thing was pale as death and still as... A mannequin, he thought stupidly. It's just a bloody mannequin. And so it was. Several, in fact. Stepping closer, he could see a pile of the things stacked against the back wall. A mass of plastic flesh, ridged with protruding hands and feet and fingers, throats ending in ragged stumps and chests long cracked. Heads, too. They looked up in thoughtless judgment from the muck, moss tears trailing over their pallid cheeks and running into the brickwork gutters of the walls. The stack reached almost 2 meters high. There must have been dozens of them in the bulk, though so few were intact it was almost impossible to be sure. Adam winced. His heart was still thunder in his throat, even as he took in the lifelessness of the figure that had startled him. His fear was a live thing, pacing the cage of his aching chest. How'd he even get through this many, he muttered. Then, without turning his back to the sight, he stepped out into the hall and let the door swing shut. It closed in silence, without even the decency to slam into place. The next 2 rooms told much the same story, though neither quite as disquieting. Mulching stacks of autobiographies wallpapered the second, and a dead mouse was putrefying in the third. But other than that, they were as unassuming as could be hoped. This is ridiculous, he thought, as he swung the final door wide. It was the fountain that saved him. As one foot hovered over the door frame border, there came a sudden gurgling crack from behind him. He pulled and turned, thoughts of switchblades and gun barrels and thick, squeezing hands flitting towards him through the pitch. Instead, there lay only the water fountain. Something had clearly rendered within its aching silver belly. The spout jutted at an angle, spitting brackish blood into the dust in a growing orange puddle. It whined softly as some ancient pipework splintered in its guts. In the haze light, it looked less machine than something of prehistory, gutted and sprawled by some long-forgotten predator. He almost felt pity. "This place is falling apart," he said. Then he stepped back to the open door. He had faltered in his surprise and was now a half-foot closer than he had been, just enough for the balls of his left foot to overstep the boundary. As it did, the strangest sense of vertigo struck him like a fist to the groin. The world tottered on its axis, and he felt himself drawn to the yawning mouth of the room. He pinwheeled wildly, churning the stagnant air into a foam of dust mites and ash as he fought to hold his balance, doing all he could to keep from falling into the room, into what? Abyss. Something primal screamed. Void. Death. One hand struck the wall and clung. Stark terror drew his fingers closed. Sandpaper scratched at the inside of his skull as his nails were driven into the plaster. Seconds ticked in knife strokes over rib and spine, muscles straining, the meat of his face wet and red and hot. Then purchase. His heel caught the door frame and levered him back. All at once his seizing hand loosed and he fell, sprawling back into the hall. There was a roaring in his ears and a dark pulse at the corner of his eye. His jaw clenched so tightly he could hear the molars creak. Terror in his blood. It was long, dreadful minutes until he felt he could stand. When he did, it was on shaking legs that teased collapse. He gripped his thighs to still them, then looked back to the room. Nothing had changed. It remained a featureless slate of shadow, quivering with dustfall like an untuned TV. A dark room in a dark hall in a dark complex, exactly as the others had been. So why am I still so afraid? Adam took a step closer, squinting. If anything, the doorway darkened. Closer again. The vertigo returned, pressing gnarled fingers behind his eyes. He dropped to his knees, tentatively reaching a hand into the room, and felt for the floor. He found none. "What the hell?" he whispered, reaching further. Again his palm touched nothing but air. Warm air, like hot breath on rain-soaked fingers. He reached further, deeper, lower, so low that his shoulder dipped across the boundary and sank with his arm into the room beneath the room. He waved it in a languid arc from side to side, then back and forth. Even when he reached to where the ground his knees now ached against should have been, he felt nothing. There was no room, only space. "Construction?" he asked the cold. Even as he spoke the word, he saw its frailty. There was no tape or taper, where the ground gave way in concrete bites to a rubble-laden pit. It simply stopped, and the echo of his breath told him it never began again. He recalled then, dimly, a trip he had taken when he was younger to a cave system up north. Whether it had been with school, scouts, or simple boy-child curiosity, he couldn't recall. What he did remember was the moment they had reached the lowest chamber that courage would permit. A narrow place, made narrower by the faux moonlight of wind-up torches and the shadows they darkened. Walls slick as oil ran in rivulets, so twisted it was impossible to tell floor from ceiling without a marker, of which there was only one. A low bar, stretching from one side of the chamber to the other, suspended just below waist height. Beyond it, a mouth, a gaping drop to the deepest caves that whispered and gulped at the thin air, drawing them close. He recalled how it had felt to stand at its lip, hand clutching the cold iron of the rail like the hilt of a sword. He recalled how it had felt to want to fall. This was not that. There was no call of the void for Adam at the edge of the doorframe, and no iron toward it. It simply was a pitcher plant that knew it did not require a lure for its trap. There would always be another insect.
Movement, stockroom 4, over.
The radio cracked, barely intelligible. The static had grown so harsh it was like listening for whispers in a wind turbine. Like nothing human. "Shut up," he murmured, in an almost drunken slur. His breathing wavered, yellowed, curdled the air into a miasma of unreality. Almost without thought, his hand drifted to his belt. It wasn't until the radio hum played against the skin of his palm that he realized what he was doing. "Shut up," he said, more promise than curse. It gibbered its usual reply. Adam tore the walkie from his belt with a sharp snap and raised it high. It sparked anew as he took a step towards the open door, reached a frenzy as his hand broached the stillness of the thing that may once have been stockroom 4. It was warm in his grip, fizzing, alive.
Move.
He let go. The words fell with it, tumbling into the black. It was the only sound. Adam held at the ledge for as long as he could bear, listening for the crunch of plastic that would mark the bottom of the pit. It never came. He lingered for long minutes, brows knit and lips gnawing raw. There was the occasional grunt or moan from the fountain, or the whistle of the wind through some long-forgotten roach hole, but no clatter, no shattering. It was only when a finger of the leaking vile water touched his heel that he found he could move again. "Good shoes," he muttered. Rationalizations came and passed in tides, drowning him, draining him, until he had to pull back. With all the care of a lion tamer, he stepped away, letting the door fall closed. As oak and iron eclipsed the black, Adam wondered if the radio was coming out of his pay. "The shadows ate it, Sam," some part of him cawed giddily. "It's a write-off." He glanced back the way he had come. Nothing had changed. It was still tinged with the same white-blue radiance, clutched in creeper fingers where the bombs would flicker. And yet there was a dread there that he had not felt before. The thought of walking back to the office teased at his insides with barbed tongues. That concrete tomb with its cable, lichen and wire seals. Every cell in his body was telling him to run like hell, but he had left too much behind. His mobile, his house keys. Frankly, it amazed Adam how much of his life ran on things any halfway determined man could swallow. 5 minutes passed before he rallied the will to move. 6 more before he rose from a shuffle to a walk, and a 7th until he could do it without shaking. A quarter hour after the walkie had slipped from his hand, Adam began to untense. Bottomless pit, he thought, shaking his head. Can have a panic attack at every set of roadworks. Should get back on the Zoloft, mate. There are potholes on the way home. He laughed softly at his own joke, his own stupidity. Then he laughed louder. It was false and harsh and hardly deserved, but it felt good to hear something ring through the halls. The witching hour had settled. The stadium silent as only a place made to hold the raucous can be. His only company were long-dead spiders and leering posters, and he froze. At the end of the hall, a figure hung, lithe and pale, painted in stark azure by the light. Human, but for the hollow space where its legs should have been. It's just another poster, he thought, and yet the vertigo was returning. As he fought to make out the blur of the shape's face, the feeling of precipice only grew stronger. He clutched at his head. A hateful throbbing ached in the space behind his brow. The hollow. The pit. He bit down hard, clamping a fleshy ridge of his tongue between canine and molar, worrying it like a haunch of stale beef. The taste of blood filled his mouth and nose. It sharpened him. "You're losing it," he hissed. The spittle that followed the words was a dark red. The cracks drank it greedily. He stepped over them. With long, clacking strides, he marched towards the figure, hunching beneath the eyes of the plastic players and their 2 wide grins. They smeared as he moved. Eyes wide as gaping mouths, mouths that stared like eyes. Folded arms bled one into the other, feeding an ouroboros of twitching muscle and veins fit to burst. They stank of sweat and dead grass. Adam was so focused on not seeing that he walked almost headlong into the shape. He stopped just short, so close that the colour was all he could divine, black on brown on white. A magic eye picture, the pattern a half step away. He hesitated, then shuffled back and watched as it came into focus. It was, in fact, just a poster, but that was small comfort. Rather than the vascular portraits that encircled it on all sides, this one was of a boy, 10, 11 maybe, sandy hair curling over pink ears that fanned out just a touch wide. He wore a mud-brown jersey that was clearly too long in the body, with dark sleeves that swallowed the knuckles of his small white hands like twin snakes. A stain poked from beneath his collar, the kind Adam's own mother would have taken to with a spit-wetted washcloth and a tut on her lips. He was smiling a broad, boyish smile that exposed the gaps where a few adult teeth were just beginning their sprout. It was the kind of picture a grandparent would keep in the front room for guests to fawn at over cups of hot tea and afternoon television. Were it not for the fact that someone had scratched out its eyes. The sockets had been peeled outward in long, thin strands, hanging limply over the cheeks in origami tears. Red brick peered back through the ruin, dark as cold blood, slick and yawning. The effect was so organic, so grotesque, that Adam's throat began to curdle with bile. He lurched, gagged. The taste of sour milk hissed against his teeth. He spat it free, and looked back to the portrait. This was not here before, he knew. Then his gaze drifted up with a dawning horror. Above the tufts of unbrushed hair, the tendrils of torn plastic. And he saw. "Oh God," he moaned. Letters had been carved into the material just above the boy's head like a halo, in the same deliberate hand. "Sweet grass and summer," it read. Adam turned and ran. Had his mind not been clouded by a fear broaching on madness, Adam might have appreciated the simplicity. There were no maze-like turns, 3rd doors down in seconds on the left. The place was a closed loop. He need only run until the crystal gleam of the reception doors came into view, with only the burn in his lungs to mark the meters. What he was running from exactly, he still wasn't sure. Only that his every sucking breath was tinged with a wrongness. A sharp, cutting doom. When the door came into view, it was as a panel of mist amongst the stone. It glowed almost ethereally, suckling at starlight. Adam could have wept. Instead, he sped up, the thumping of his feet a metronome, a heartbeat. The door swelled as he drew closer, until it was monolithic, all-encompassing, so bright that Adam had to squint against its glare. He reached out a hand to throw it wide. "Sam can shove his 11 quid up his..." The door swung inward to meet him with a sickening force. Adam heard his fingers splinter before he felt them break, with a dull, wet pop against the glass. He had just enough time to take in the awful sight of new knuckles sprouting amidst torn flesh and skin before the rest of him followed. Palm crumpled into wrist, folded into forearm and elbow and shoulder, crackling in awful staccato like gunfire. He was allowed a half gasp of pain before his cheekbone crunched against the unyielding door, and all slipped into darkness. Consciousness returned in ringing shards, and dark flashes, and deep, aching pains. His tongue was copper, his flesh afire. The scent of old tears hung in a musk thick as sodden towels about his head. It burned like coals when he breathed, like ice when he didn't. His first thought was that it hurt to be dead. "Please," he pleaded, to no one in particular. His nerves, maybe, begging them to still. "Hurts." "I bet," came a reply. "Christ, mate, I've seen roadside foxes in for your parts." Adam opened his eyes, or rather tried to. Only the right one managed more than a slit, and that with such effort it was immediately drowned in fresh tears. And the light, God, the light. He would have preferred a razor to the cornea. "What?" he croaked. "Who?" Hey there," the voice tutted. "I'd save your strength, mate. You've had a proper crack to the old loaf of bread." "Sam?" Adam managed. From the ache in his shoulder and the touch of coolness against his lips, he had deduced he was lying crumpled on the floor. An attempt to sit up sent day labourers to work inside his head, hammers and diggers tearing at the softness of his brain. He would have screamed, but his mouth was sealed shut against wooden flooring. What happened? He thought through the evil in his skull. Then he recalled. The door. Someone hit me with the door. And with that the dam burst, the night flooding back in a tide of terror and pain. Viscous, clotting adrenaline filled his body with such force he near vaulted upright. Dark forests crowded his vision as he did, head packing with cotton, but he fought unconsciousness like a drowning man. There was a delicate moment where all was light and thunder. Then it passed, leaving only the pain. He opened his good eye. He was back in the office. It had grown wilder in his absence. Wiring twisted in vineyard clumps above, bloating with fat plastic cuffs and glimmering bronze. The shelves now moaned beneath the weight of steel parts, broken glass, and abstract machines whose purpose had either been long forgotten or never devised. The place burned with fever, heaved. Both hospice and resident made one. At its heart stood Sam, aglow in the light of the monitor. It gave his flesh a gangrenous tone. The sagging of his skin did nothing to abate. He looked all but ready to slough into the foundations, but for the pinned smile that made him more mascot than man. He reminded Adam of some pale, hulking ape in the seconds before it peeled a man's throat from his spine like the flesh from an orange. "Whoa there," said Sam, spreading his hands wide. "I'd stay down if I were you. Got a face like a sack of gravel." "Why?" Adam began, then lurched. Something was grinding in his side, turning his marrow to magma. He almost fainted again. "Ambulance," he wheezed. Sam only laughed. Come on, be a man about it. Got a few hours yet till you're off." Then, faster than he would have believed, Sam snapped at the waist and grabbed a fistful of Adam's collar, hauling him to his feet. "Whinge on your own goddamn time." Adam tottered, slumped, would surely have fallen if not for a mass of jutting screws catching the back of his shirt. Stomach-steeped blood rushed to his head, filling it fit to burst. Everything rang. "He's going to kill me," he thought, with an almost comforting certainty. Instead, Sam brushed a white hand across his collar to smooth it, then patted his cheek. The skin was dry and hideously soft. "Back to it, yeah? Had your toasted tea break thanks to the bloody unions. Now on the old horse." "Sam, wait, this... before I forget." Sam reached somewhere behind his bulk, fumbling for a moment. When he brought his hand back, he was clutching a small, dark shape. "You dropped this." The radio. As unmarked as it had been as it tumbled into the pit. Adam's throat seized, panic leaching from heart to bone. He tried to pull away, but that served only to drive the screws deeper. His back wept hot, crimson tears. Sam did not let his smile waver, but once again there was a cloud behind his eyes, the sclera darkening, like ink in pond water. He stepped closer and snapped the walkie back into place on Adam's left side. He would have batted it away, but the arm was little more than meat and kindling. Moving it was beyond him. Sam studied him for a moment, then nodded, satisfied. "Don't let it happen again, alright, mate? You'll be needing that. Now, why don't we both just..." He trailed off. His brow dipped almost imperceptibly, and he turned to the monitor. Adam tried to follow his gaze, but he found turning his head an impossible task. "Really? Again?" Sam grunted. Then he turned back. "Seems it's gonna have to wait." The woman's back. It took some time before Adam could make the connection. Then it struck home. Mary. Then James. Then sweet grass and summer. As he fought to hold the thought steady, Sam brushed him aside and strode to the door. "Don't go anywhere," he smiled. Then he was gone. When the sound of his footsteps had receded into near enough nothing, Adam's knees buckled. Or maybe the world rose to touch him. It was difficult to tell. He put out his good arm to steady himself and watched as his other swung limply beside it. It was as bad as he had imagined. His fingers were twisted like unstaked saplings, curling with a half-dozen new joints and cartilage sproutlings. There was a tear between his index and middle where ragged skin made little more than a curtain shade, a dangling red tendon, and what could only be bone. The arm itself was little better. Whilst his hand had taken the brunt of the damage, a bright purple stain crept from a wrist twice its normal size, tracing a path to an elbow straining against itself, bloating like a sponge in cold mung. It was a horror of gore and contortion, something out of a trench infirmary. And yet, no blood, he finished. Not a drop. The meat was white as cod flesh. Where is it all going? Then he thought back to the pipe that had rung against his head in those first meagre hours. He recalled the gentle gurgling sound it had made, the cooing of an infant with a belly full of warm milk.
West Side Cloakroom, over.
The radio spat, and whatever blood remained to him ran cold. He wanted more than anything to dash it to pieces, but the thought of grinding his broken body against itself to touch the thing made him ill. There was, he knew, only one thing he could do. With every bit of will he had left, Adam got to his feet, shuffled to the door, and passed through. The hallway he emerged into was not the one that had lain there in the hours before. Similar, of course. There were only so many combinations of rust and stone. But the vents above were larger, wheezing, things of industrial abattoirs and power plants wailing their meltdown. Water stains had grown into great topographies that painted entire walls. Layers of scum eating their way through concrete pillars several inches thick. The breeze was still as death, warm as a fevered kiss. And dear God, the smell! Beyond rot, beyond decay, it was the all-encompassing reek of body on body on body. It curdled on his tongue, heady as liquor, writhing like so many grease-stained palms.
West Side Cloakroom, over.
He turned east. It was slow going. His every step sent jolts through his side, his every falter driving nails through his eyes. I was wrong. Being dead can't hurt worse than this. Even his thoughts came in low moans, so frail he couldn't be sure they were his own. It was like sharing a mind with a beaten dog, whining for the cage rather than the whip. And yet he continued. The walkie broke in with its occasional chatter, though Adam hardly noticed. When he did, it was so strange he found it easier to let it slip from his mind.
Movement in walk-in freezer 6, over. Clotting in the boiler room, over. Weeping in sub-basement 43, over. Singing in the long, quiet dark,
pressed on. "It has to end," he said, more as a spur than with any genuine belief. "I know there's an exit. It broke my face." Around him the corridors bent and crashed like tides. He would take a turn and find its twin behind the curve. Flat plains gave way to sign-waving tile and bedrock, steep hills and slopes that set him to stumbling. The chemical stink of toilets that had known more ammonia than hell's deepest layer wafted from archways black as night. Some halls had doors, others hatches. Some had other things. One was constructed entirely of cardboard, hand-painted with the same stains and marrings as the rest, the graffiti replaced with "this way ups" as far as the eye could see. As for the mannequins, he tried not to look. To the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. When finally the exit came into view, he almost mistook it for a sunspot. But then he had not seen the sun for a very long time. It glimmered as it had in the moments before his skull turned all to stars, so limestone bright it would have made the sun an ember. It too had changed. Rather than indenting an unassuming breadth of wall, it now sat at the far end of a corridor. That being a corridor in the sense a guillotine is a barber's chair, it was cavernous, swollen in places like unsmoothed wallpaper. The roof reached so high it was only visible by the lights it suspended, and even they were little more than constellations in an artificial sky. Adam shuddered. There should have been relief. Instead, he felt as though he were looking up at a set of bared teeth as he was swallowed whole. But what else can I do? His pace quickened in so much as it could. The echo of his footsteps chased him all the while, his breath trailing in living tendrils over his nape. His broken arms swung in a grotesque pendulum, crinkling with the motions, marking the seconds. Clack, crunch, clack, crunch. When finally he reached the door, he hesitated. He recalled the hideous blur of the thing, how it had rendered bone and meat to matches. A dull throb was building in his left hand. It had begun to bleed again, he saw. A steady drip, 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 stamping perfect little circles in the ground before they shrank, dissipating into nothing. The sight filled him with a sudden anger. He had seen his own blood before, many a time. He had made his choices. Some had ended in cuts, bruises, the shedding of hair and tears, and yes, blood. There had been pain. Some were the reason he had taken the first job that bothered to call back. But he had not chosen this. "You don't get to eat me," he swore. The rage grew, shoving aside the agonies and the endless bloody fear. He took the last steps at as close to a run as he could manage. Then, without another thought, he reached across his waist to where the radio sang. The motion filled his lungs with needles, but he was long past caring. With his final stride, he drew it back, paused for just a heartbeat, then hurled it at the glass with all the force his numbing fingers would allow.
"Oh,"
it croaked, in the millisecond it took for it to cross the gap, soaring like a tank shell. When it struck the pain center, there was an almighty crack and scream, the glass shattering in thunder into 1,000 bolts of glittering lightning. The radio continued, vanishing through the door frame and into the shadows that lay beyond, an almost musical tinkling following in its wake. Adam watched the door crumble through a strand of sweat-soaked hair. He almost smiled. Instead, he ran his hand over the mop of his brow to brush his vision clear, and hobbled forward, the crackle of glass his herald. It was not the reception, but Adam hadn't the heart to be disappointed anymore. Instead, he found himself overlooking a set of old iron stairs, the kind found latched to the fire escapes of long-abandoned buildings. The steps were dark and dripping with rainwater, leading down into a slick stone stairwell that radiated a flaying cold. At least from what he could tell. The light reached less than a few meters before fading to twilight, then midnight. It could have been 2 flights or 200. It could never end at all. He was still weighing the odds of escape against a broken neck when the hand clasped his shoulder. "And here I thought they'd be kicking and screaming," came a chuckle from behind. "Well, limping and crying more like, eh?" Adam tried to wrench away, but Sam's fingers were rebar beneath the suit of his flesh. Crooked nails caressed his throat like fat brown spider legs, burning white furrows along his collar, his carotid. He did it with a gentleness that betrayed the strength behind them. Sam could carve him open with a flex. "Let me go," he hushed. "Hey now, back on the dole already?" "Nah, not you. Trust me, I've had worse stuff, and you've got grit, mate. I like that. Just..." Suddenly the hand was slipping from his shoulder to his throat and twisting savagely. Hellfire blazed as skin burned against skin, and Adam had to turn with the motion to keep from losing his head. When the two men were face to face, the iron grip reforged. There was a pop in his jaw and a bursting in his temple. His face floated unmoored from his skull. "Now, Sonny Jim," said Sam. With the light to his back, he was all silhouette, but for the gleam of his grin. "There's something you need to see, but I don't need any more faff, yeah? Get you nice and placid. A team player." The other hand affixed itself and grew tighter, crushing, squeezing. Adam felt the big man's thumbs sink to the knuckle. His eyes strained in their swollen sockets. "Our team, our art, our home. You're gonna learn what that means, my boy." His legs were kicking, sending sprays of broken glass plinking down the stairwell. He tried to scream, but the roar in his head drowned out the sound. "That's it, that's the way. Brave heart, lad. Almost out of the woods." And then Adam was breathing again. Deep, sucking gulps that tasted of peat and salt. Deliciously cool. The blood drained from his good eye, static peeling away in painful strips to reveal Sam. He had not moved, only loosened. The hands were still around his throat, but the vice had slacked. And not only his hands. Sam had the strangest look on his face. Something Adam would have called bemusement if he thought the man capable of surprise. And there was something else, something stranger, that he could not quite place. Sam began, then coughed. A sickening judder ran through him. He coughed again, harder this time, and something damp pattered against Adam's face, over his tongue. He tasted iron. As he watched, the fat man's head lolled, his cheeks falling into an awful grimace. Hurts, he groaned. That judder came again, and this time Adam found its source. Within the fold between Sam's chin and collar, a small silver eye had opened, weeping black blood. His flesh shuddered around it like a cockroach on a pinboard, each jolt sending tears as big as pearls rolling in crimson streaks down his shirt. He watched it run, more confused than afraid. It wasn't until Sam began to rock violently from side to side that Adam understood. "My boy," said Mary Reed, her thin arms quaking under the weight of the pickaxe still buried in Sam's throat. "Have you seen my boy?" "Ew," Sam gurgled, reaching a wavering hand, pawing at the wound. Slick fingers found the point and fumbled at it, as if trying to burst the steel like a cyst. Before he could find purchase, Mary wrenched the thing free with a vile, sucking sound, then swung again. This time it punched into Sam's side, sinking to the hilt in the meat mire. Adam fancied he heard the pop of a kidney. Suddenly, Sam stopped shaking. He hung suspended between the axe's head and his own rictus arms, tottering almost imperceptibly between the two, fresh blood gusseting as the dark eye winked beneath his chin. There was a moment of utter stillness. And then he died. Perhaps the fog of near death had not yet faded. Perhaps, in a complex of such impossible dimensions, physics had ceased to be something Adam stopped to consider. Whatever the cause, by the time he realized what was about to happen, it had already begun. He watched as Sam's bulk slumped forward with the inevitability of a glacier. He watched as Mary was dragged along by her own caught weapon. He watched as the pair, live and dead alike, toppled towards him in a ruinous tide. Then they were falling. For the second time that night, Adam was dredged from unconsciousness and into pain. He groaned. Whatever scant parts had remained unbruised in his first collision were not so well served by the second. His every limb bristled with cuts and slashes, belying the fractures beneath. "How am I not dead?" When his eyes finally creaked open, he got his answer. Somehow, in the midst of their descent, Sam's body had twisted beneath him, cushioning him from the worst of the trauma. He wondered whether the sight had been more comical or grotesque, then decided he would rather not know. The man himself lay splayed as a bearskin rug, stained a purple nearing black where the stairs had left their mark. His face was locked in a mask of red death, sightless gaze drinking in Adam's own. He held it for a single, long minute. "Reap and sow, mate," he grunted, then rolled from the bulk. It had all the texture of a half-filled beanbag. He tried to rise, then fell, cursing. A heat was radiating from his left ankle, scorching the cuffs of his jeans. Twisted or broken or missing entirely, standing would be no small feat. As Adam cradled beside the thing that had been Sam Samuels, he took in his surroundings for the first time. The stairwell had spat them into what appeared to be a small storage area, no bigger than a child's bedroom. A squat, wood-panelled thing, near perfectly square. A few empty crates lined one wall, a brush with no bristles against the other. A single bulb hung morosely from an off-white cord, the light flitting like a sprite in a mason jar. A simple door lay at the far end of the room, its brass knob twinkling in the orange glow. It would not have looked out of place as some cleaner's quarters, if not for something partway between exhaustion and dread needled in the fibrous cords of his spine.
Over.
The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, but of course that was ridiculous.
Over.
The thing that called to him had no eyes to see.
Over. Here. Over. Here. Over. Here.
Adam turned. The walkie lay at the foot of the stairs where iron and grate weaned into oak. It lay amidst a smattering of plastic shards, though the thing itself was remarkably intact. Aside from a snapped antenna, it had retained its hateful little shape. The sight of it teased out his rage. He looked back to Sam's corpse, scanning, searching. Then he saw it. The pickaxe, loosed from its fleshy charge. With his one good hand, he clasped the handle and wrenched it free. A soft sigh came with it, and a shower of drying blood. With grit teeth and clenched fist, Adam shoved the flat head of the axe into his armpit and drove the other end against the floor, levering himself upright. It was short as crutches went, but it would serve. He shuffled to the radio in a pitiful 3-step, refusing to pause until it sat at his feet.
Over. Here.
It crowed. The voice was different somehow. Still harsh with the static haze, but less electrical. More the sound of a toothless man sucking at pork crackling. And the plastic pieces. There's something strange there as well. It was white mixed in with the black, but the thing's casing was matte as oiled leather. Closer now, he could make out a long, thin crack in the radio's body, gnashing with black plastic teeth. Perhaps some of the internals had spilled in the fall. But then how was it shattering? He bent double to grasp it and, by some second nature, raised it to his ear. A long, wet tongue sloughed from the crack and lapped at his cheek. Too disgusted even to scream, Adam dropped the thing. He caught a flash of something dark and red and grinning with blood-flecked teeth from within the radio's cracked shell. Then it struck the hardwood and went spinning back against the wall. He followed it, the slickness of his cheek blazing with a hatred that superseded any horror.
Over.
The thing that was not a radio had time to spit before Adam brought down his heel. There was a moment of resistance, then a damp, grinding screech as the thing burst apart, piece by hideous piece. A spackle of unmentionable fluid doused the wall in brownish streaks. A tooth the size of a pound coin exploded with such violence from the mass that it sank to the root into the wood. All the while the stray tongue rolled. When finally it fell still, Adam stepped away, breathing hard. He looked upon his work through a steam of sweat and filth. "I killed it," he wheezed. Then, "I killed you." "If whatever it is can die," something within him replied. He shook the thought free, then turned from the sight. Odd as it was to say, it was only as he saw her vanish through the open door that Adam remembered Mary. By the time he recalled that yes, she too had fallen, she was little more than a whisper of cotton and grey-streaked hair, snaking into shadow. "Wait, stop!" he called after her, but his voice had frailed, and the words hardly passed his lips. A violent cough scrabbled in his throat like a trapped animal as he stumbled, retching to the door. "Miss Reed, Mary, just... Oh, Christ." Somewhere, in a soft pink recess of his brain. Adam Tor. What exactly it had been, he could never have said. All he could do was look on and rend. Mary stood in a room of tarnished platinum, rocking gently on her heels. Her reflections rocked with her, each wall twitching and undulating in a tessellate of translucent flesh and wide staring eyes. She was smiling as she did it, one hand outstretched and caressing. A thing. A red thing, red and purple, threaded through with pockets of fatty white tissue that had circled it in seams. A thing pulsing, twitching, bulging with tumorous growths, coated in a hot, pinkish matter, caked in it, like the withered scraps of long-burst balloons. A thing that hung in the room's centre, suspended by a spool of thousands upon thousands of clear, thin tubes, each pumping a thick stream of dark ichor into its mass, from a ceiling that rose beyond heaven. Our team, our heart, our home, he thought, as he took in the immensity of it. Oh Christ, he said again, though the words meant nothing anymore. At that, Mary turned to him. Oh, she said, in a small, calm voice. Hello, you. I'm so glad you came. I have so much to thank you for. Thank me, he echoed. Of course. Joyful tears were welling in her eyes. You did it. You found him. She turned back to the heart thing. You found my James. He followed her gaze. Her hand was resting against the flesh, brushing it gently with tender fingers. A particular lump squirmed at her touch, as if trying to dredge itself free of the clump and into her cradled palm. It was around the size of a basketball, its surface smooth but for two sunken craters halfway up, and within them, he stiffened. The lump looked back at him with pale, pleading eyes. Green eyes. Sweet grass and summer. I told you, didn't I? Mary sighed happily. Just like his father's.
What follows is an excerpt of the May 2017 edition of Décollage Art Magazine.
Voiceless Artist, Silent Peace, The Marred Works of Guinevere Croyne, by Bartholomew Mann. 2 stars. Published on the 19th of May 2017. With the infamous auteur's sudden return, it would seem that the dead do indeed speak. But is it anything we haven't heard before? The gallery had been all but abandoned by the time I arrived. Not simply vacated, also hollowed in the way a swamp is drained or a cavity excavated. A lingering revulsion hung in that place, and as my Louboutins clacked against the cheap linoleum, it was difficult not to take note of the scant few patrons who milled about, with nodding heads and crumpled pamphlets, of the beading sweat that coated every one of their blushed faces, of the one place not one of their gazes would dare come to rest. Their eyes flickered across the same few pieces that spattered the hall again and again, their pale, sallow glances giving the briefest touch to the doorway that led deeper into the gallery. I passed them by, striding to the small plaque set to the doorframe side, stopping just short of crossing into the darkened hallway, and read the words you have undoubtedly already guessed were carved within the steel. The Croyne Exhibit. A simple name, though simplicity is a tool Miss Croyne has made frequent use of in her previous exhibitions. The last I had attended in the year before her extended hiatus had been an equally modest affair in both square feet and scope, though it had been her usual paintings lining the walls then, brushes marring canvases in tight, pale strokes, hung atop dull grey stone and smelling slightly of mildew. I will spare my readers an echoing of my thoughts on the works in question, and conclude by saying I was grateful for the complimentary drinks that followed the display. But I digress. There is a phrase that anyone who has ever observed a piece of creative work has uttered, one that, once heard, latches itself to the mind in a mimetic parasitism, burrowing into the soft and fleshy meat of the brain and biding its time, waiting for the moment when the observer is met with a piece so dull and yet so inexplicably beloved that all they can do is hatch the words while their true thoughts worry away at their lips, scrabbling like a broken thing at the cellar door. It speaks to me. If you are invested enough in the world of the arts to be reading these words, then this phrase has assuredly papered the walls of your waking nightmares over the past month. It is understandable, of course, if an artist at the center of one of the most infamous missing persons cases of the modern age suddenly debuts a new piece, penning a review declaring it milquetoast at best, is unlikely to draw in the kind of readers an online magazine requires in this economy. Fortunately, I have already been paid. The titular Croyne's new piece, once you have made your way through the layers of theatrical darkness and twisting, curdled halls, is boring. I had heard tell of its nature, of course. It had been almost unavoidable in the days following its sudden appearance and subsequent recovery from her Llandav home. Some called it a masterpiece, others a suicide note. Early reports initially claimed it was what remained of her corpse, and her failure to make a public appearance in the ensuing media storm have only fueled the fire of intrigue. However, from where I sit with fingers poised to dancing across antique keys, trying to recall what I felt upon entering that space, with a piece hung like a metronome without time to keep, I struggle to recall any stirring within me at all. This brings us, rather lumberingly, to the work in question. Croyne's Flayed is a remarkably self-descriptive piece on every level imaginable. And if you must abandon the remainder of this review in order to attend something more engaging, like, say, a slug trying to inch its way out of a bucket of tar, then rest easy, knowing that that is essentially all there is to say on the matter. Upon first entering the room where it is housed, you are met with what most likely was intended to be a total darkness. Unfortunately, it would seem the good people of the Moon Gallery have failed to cut the blackout curtains to the required size, and so the featureless ink of the veiled sun becomes nothing more than a rather dimly lit storage unit. After a moment's passing, there comes a sound. The thrumming of fledgling electronics, all sparks and crackles and the heady reek of ozone, before a thin spotlight flickers to life somewhere above, and the raucous chaos gives way to a gentle hum. Tracing that light from where it sits amongst the groaning steel of the rafters, you come to rest at what you were there to see all along. Skin. It feels almost unnecessary to describe exactly what hangs there in the imperfect dark, swaddled in the pale light of half-dead bulbs. Unless you have spent the better part of a month without Wi-Fi or dead, then you have seen the pictures, smearing every device capable of displaying a JPEG like a mimetic astigmatism. Nevertheless, when future art historians are attempting to divine the mania this work has incited, long after the thing itself has no doubt been discarded as the derivative novelty it always was, perhaps these words shall be their only remaining tether to the attitudes that spawned it. And isn't that just a pleasant thought? Blade is, as one could herald a guess, a replica of its creator's own skin, hung by fishing wire and suspended just enough to give the illusion of an autonomous verticality. In the harsh light, it is initially a strain to pass the unfurlment of sagging nudity. Croyne was not an unattractive woman by all accounts, but strung as she was, the thinness of the flesh had given way beneath itself, creating small pockets of bulbous mass where there should be smooth skin, concave shadows where muscles should sit. In spite of this, it remains just human enough in silhouette. The little anachronisms require double take. Only then does it begin to worry at you, your mind peeling and unpicking each layer of the uncanny until you are unsure as to how you could have seen anything of a person in it at all. Standing mere inches from its slackened features, something begins to nag, something that cannot be placed beneath the lank, ropey hair and lingering flakes of long-dried blush. It is a strange sensation to see so much you recognize in a face, and yet for there to be so much of it absent. I suspect this is what had so finely curated the unease of the other patrons. And little wonder, the now infamous police sketch that followed her disappearance is the most evocative piece in her portfolio, simply for how even beneath the shapeless flailing of a 2B pencil on printed paper, those eyes managed to blaze. I had argued at the time against the flooding of conspiracies, of whatever fancy it was that had gashed the headline that day, suggesting the event itself as a bespoke unveiling of a new artistic endeavour that would surely dredge Croyne from the mire her work had entrenched her in. Stood as I was then, before the hanging skin with its hollow sockets and stolen scream, I realized that I had been mistaken. There is nothing new to see in this piece, no greater insight into the mind of one whom the media had clamoured to know. Only a derivative waste of floor space, entering the creative spectrum on the ground floor. It begs the question, what was Croyne doing all this time? The answer seems to lay in the technical skill, while what meagre spark of vision that remained in Miss Croyne presumably withered and died unmourned, her efficiency has accelerated to an almost impossible degree. The skin is masterfully moulded, every inch of its crumpled form radiating a living, thriving sickness. Stood before it, there comes a moment where you are taken by the strangest idea. The thought that if you were to reach out and brush against it, the dregs of warmth dissipating into the evening's chill could still be felt against your fingertips. Most intriguing, however, is what it looks like on the inside, the wetness of the stuff. If you have ever scraped your knee as a child, you will remember just how much comes away when skin is taken. The little scraps of greying meat, the thin coating of blood spread like marmalade on hot toast, all the little imperfections that in themselves become fresh violence when you dare to look and make the pain new, real. Considering Miss Croyne's work is entirely without seam, the degree to which it simulates reality seems doubly impossible. and I can only hazard a guess as to how it was achieved. Perhaps an artisan brush on the end of a broomstick. But if nothing else, it succeeds in creating the impression of someone having cut themselves out of their own body, lips first, worming through their own gaping mouth, one stroke of the filleting knife at a time. In closing, the piece is provocative and certainly effective enough in the moment, but as I passed through the reception door, I felt unease slip from me like snakeskin under the evening sky. It is easy to provoke. A child with a tin drum can provoke, but rarely is said child then offered a place within the Vienna Philharmonic, flayed, while managing to conjure a certain cocktail of primal dread, passes just as quickly, leaving nothing but a lingering sense of anticlimax. While some may find this display cathartic in its closure, Croyne's latest is more media exercise than masterpiece. Perhaps one day we will see something of the creative beneath the layers of trepidity. But until then, I recommend you save the admission fee for something worth your time, like a visit to the dermatologist.
Addendum. Case number 00111037. Date 30th of May 2017. Reporting Officer Deputy Dunscombe. Incident type: robbery, homicide. Address of occurrence: Cal Moon Gallery, Cardiff, CF 27 4RW. Witnesses: none available. Evidence: footprints, bloody, recovered from windowsill. Corpse of Edward Ahere, gallery security. Journal entry: discovered at suspect residence. See supplemental material. Weapons, objects used: Otto Mueller 1881 series Deber knife. On the 25th of May, at approximately 2:05 in the morning, the silent alarm for the Moon Gallery was tripped, noting a disturbance in the left wing. Deputy Wood arrived at the scene to find it locked, showing no signs of a forced entry. He attempted to draw security attention to the entrance, but found no answer, and in accordance with protocol, he then searched the perimeter for any sign of distress. Wood then discovered a broken window to the ground floor's southeastern side. Forces were dispatched along with gallery caretaker Callum Carroll, who admitted the officers through the front door. Within the reception area, the guard on duty, Edward Ahere, was discovered slumped against the eastern wall. He had severe lacerations across his face and hands, and a blood-stained knife, see inventory, in his lap. Ahere was pronounced dead at the scene, cause of death since having been determined as blood loss. Upon further investigation, Deputy Siobhan confirmed that only one piece had been touched. Guinevere Croyne's flayed the gallery's centerpiece. It had been removed from its display and could not be found at the scene. It has yet to be recovered. Supplemental material: journal extract of Bartholomew Mann, discovered at residence.
When I was 7 years old, the first of the warts came. Not many to begin with, just a few marring the cuticle of my nails in hard, cracked braille. I felt no pain and little discomfort, and as with all children, I cared little for aesthetics, as long as my hands were fit to play, my legs fit to pump, my lungs fit to ring with laughter and shrieks and cries for mother. In fact, I had often delighted in forming my hands into fleshy claws, baring them to my peers and playing the monster to their cries of theatrical disgust. It was a game where the toys were always within reach. I grew older, but the game would not end. They spread, rippled across my hands, the soles of my feet, the corner of my eyes. On and throughout my entire body the flesh grew bulbous and dry, swollen and crumbling, until I could not bend my fingers without the sound of skin cracking like old paint. In time, the screams of my playmates became less playful, and with a sudden lurch I was a teenager, and wreathed in a fresh insecurity. A white-hot burning shame at my condition. I did everything I could to rid myself of the blight. I bound them in rolls of choking tape, lathered them in cells that burned worse than hellfire, scraped layer after layer of half-dead flesh from their surface in hopes of carving out the worming, gnawing rot within. Nothing helped. Inevitably, time had been the cure. Though they did not vanish, they did fade, leaving small discs of pale, bloodless matter sitting and aching just beneath my every pore. Occasionally they would broach the surface in a blossom of dead tissue when stress took me, but in such cases I could hide away until the flowering receded. That is, until I touched it. Croyn's skin, so unbearably smooth, so beautifully rendered, so perfect, that by the time I had taken my fingers from its shape, the warts had already begun to swell again, as if reacting to my errant thoughts of donning it, being it. Since then they have only grown worse, more numerous. My fingers are ballooned to twice their size. The flesh of my palms is cracking into great crevasses of dust and yellowed meat. I can barely see anymore. The warts crowd my eyelids, my eye sockets, my eyes. There was nothing else to be done. The doctors could not help. They could never have helped. All I have is myself. Myself and an old fish knife. I think it was a gift, and I suppose that is exactly what it has been. I have already made progress on my left hand, now so red and raw and bare and clean. Within the week the rot will be uprooted entirely. Then it is a simple matter of returning to the exhibit under cover of darkness and taking the skin, the life I have always been owed. My review will ensure that the gallery remains empty, waiting, ready.
End of supplemental. The investigation is ongoing.
The bitch is at the door again, baying, crooning. It's all she ever does. In the bedroom's dark, Caleb wills himself deaf. Sweetheart? Sweetheart, are you in? Words as stale as they are saccharine, acidic, almost, scolding the soft pulp of his teeth, black as beetlebacks. He draws a nail across one in ploughman strokes, and feels enamel, clay-like, stick to the rags of the bed. He sucks it clean. Sweetheart? Just leave me alone. His thoughts come in slow, cold poisons. Caleb turns them from her to the small television set in the room's corner. He does not remember turning it on, but then neither does he recall ever turning it off. An advertisement for a fast food restaurant plays across the glass. Children with broad, grease-slicked smiles skitter and spit, fingers flecked with slate blue meats. The colours dance against the gloom. Caleb cannot be sure where they end and the migraines begin. I'm coming in, okay? The door creaks open. Ugly yellow stains grow fat and sopping where the light touches. His heart begins to race. At the door. You're supposed to leave dinner at the door. Mercifully, the tide slows. Only her head broaches the border, and even that is a shadow. I know, sweetheart, I know, but... She trails off. She's always doing that. It's one of the million habits she employs in order to drive him insane. Caleb shoots her a hideous glance and takes some small satisfaction when she starts. Your father will be home tonight. Maybe you could eat downstairs. With us. He does not drop his eyes. She meets them with a pale smile, half glimpsed through a veil of grey hair gone brittle and sour. Aged more than old, his mother is a small and cowed woman, with thin, twitchy hands that pluck themselves to the quick. Something boils in him when he looks at her. At the door, he says, letting each syllable tick, tick, tick away. She bites her lip. When next she speaks, her teeth are pink to the root. Okay, sweetheart. Just a minute. She steps back into the hall. The dim tide draws in behind her, taking with it the smell of polyester and candles burned to the nub. There are minutes where the air is as still and as stale and as sweet as any he has ever tasted, but it always sours. It comes later than he expects and sooner than he hopes. The soft scuff of familiar feet, the clinking of steel on ceramic playing in tinny duet. A stink fills him, sausage, spitting fat and thick, creamy grease. You can taste their lukewarmth already. The footsteps stop. A silence follows them, deliberate and bulging with the unspoken, the unspeakable. He hears them anyway, the ghosts of sniping's past. I just think you could try. There's always, if you would just... Instead there comes only a sigh and a clattering as the plate comes to rest. The scuffing fades like hoarfrost. When the only sound is the television's blare, Caleb walks to the door and sneaks a plate clear of its frame. He was right. 3 fat, grey fingers scab over the enamel. A mound of peas amass on their eastern flank, a dollop of mash encroaching from the south, all accosted by a siege of water-streaked cutlery. It turns his guts, even as his stomach roars demand. She waited. She waited until it was cold. He should send it spinning across the room, let her hear it shatter and stain. But he doesn't. Rather, he slumps atop his bed and begins to eat. It's slow going. The peas pop like hardened blisters, the mash tar thick. He tries a spoonful and shudders as it coagulates on his tongue. bloody skipslough, he curses, before turning on the sausages. They are little better, their skins leathery and unyielding to the dull butter knife. He curses again and slams his fork into one. It gives way with a generous spatter of grease across his bedclothes. The smell of mulching pits fills the room. As he eats, he turns his gaze back to the television, where a nature doc has begun to play. Something to do with insects, a swarm of ants twitching like stippled tendons over logs and dead leaves. A small bird warbles beside them, its head cocks to and fro, dim and dark eyes reading the mass. Then it darts, plucks a beakful from the throng, and gulps them down. There is a flash of writhing legs in oak-brown pincers. Then comes the crunch of kindling in flame, and they are gone. Caleb watches, strangely rapt, as something changes in the swarm. The chitinous muscles go taut as each ant turns its vacant gaze to where the little bird skitters and feasts, its feathers staining pus yellow beneath trickling hemolymph. It does not see what Caleb sees from his omnipotent perch. It does not see the currents change. It picks another clump from the mass, bigger this time, but not all are caught. Several pull free of their siblings and scrabble their way from mass to beak to head. The bird twitches, flicking a few loose, but the rest only latch harder. Caleb mills a lump of gristle between his teeth as he watches one particularly determined specimen find an eye. Its jaws affix with a soft pop, and suddenly the twitches are spasms, so violent he can almost hear the crackling of hollow vertebrae. The bird flutters its wings, tries to rise, but too late, much too late. Already the swarm is thickening around its stick-thin legs, scissoring through blue feathers into pink flesh. It falls with a little trill of pure animal terror, and then it is swallowed. Damn, he mutters, raking another mouthful, as the bugs raise stray feathers like cold banners. He hardly tastes. The pork runs down his throat in a soft mire. Even the smell has waned. It is the texture that sets his guts to toiling, slick and gritty in equal measure, and it itches, God above it itches, like nettles and ulcers and all the other stinging things. Caleb dumps the mound he had been raising back to the plate and sucks the fork clean. Then, with a surgeon's hand, he levers it between his teeth until he feels cool steel beneath his tongue and begins to scratch. His incisors are all but ruins and like to crumble if the prongs ring against them. So he is gentle, so very gentle, tilling the ache in his gums stroke by stroke. What has she put in these? He wonders, spitting a wad of saliva to the sheets. Inside, warm blood whirls, steaming quietly. Blood and flecks of sausage, and something else. He frowns, dark flecks speckle the pink. He leans closer, feeling all the while for the signs of new shavings jostled loose. But no, his teeth are intact insofar as they can be. What is that, pepper? She spiced these goddamn things for once? Oh, he gives a sudden, barking cry of disgust. Within the rum-red spittle, parts twitch and shudder. Stray legs and antennae, carapaces cracked like clamshells, small, oaken heads with jaws still a scissor, mangled, insectile bodies, flickering with lives freshly taken. Jesus! Caleb cries, a hand rising to his mouth. Then he thinks better and snatches a quarter cup of water stewing on his desk from who knows how many nights ago. Knocking it back like brandy, he rinses from cheek to tonsil before spitting back into the glass and raising it to the light. It is shadowed with new blood, spittle thickening the liquid to curds. Even still, he can just about make out brown shapes kicking to the surface. The glass falls from his hand. He is retching before it hits the floor, sending the few live ants languishing across the carpet. "That cow!" he rasps through Bile's slick beard. "That bloody cow!" His fingers clench and loose, rage and disgust playing in goose-flesh braille across his bare arms. In his mind's eye he sees her, running a knife along a soft pink underbelly, hollowing sausage flesh, pressing scuttling things into the space left behind. She wants me out. She wants me gone. She wants me with the bugs and the worms. He stands, sending the meal's remains to join the drowned and the dying, and storms to the door. He hopes she can hear him. He hopes she's afraid. Caleb finds his mother worrying her nails against a countertop stain. Flakes of old coffee and older wood fall like fresh snow. Mahogany screams. The sound fills his skull with nesting cicadas. "Where did you get them?" She flinches. Her nail gives a final, sharp rasp as she turns. "Oh, the sausages. At the butcher's, do you like them? I can get them again if you... Did you think I wouldn't notice? Were you at the keyhole giggling like a schoolgirl? Well, I choked down a colony. Or did you want me to see? Sweetheart, I don't understand. Did you want me to feel them wriggle and worm?" She gives no answer. Her face lifts into a weak smile, hoping that by the time it forms she will get the joke. It doesn't take, falling again to that familiar, placid, placating mask. The usual bloody masks. Seeing them, his heart simmers. So where? The playground? The garden? Ordered them online? That would be just like you, you bloody, lazy stupid. He chokes on his own fetid rage and hisses, pounding a fist against the wall. The room is spinning. He is so goddamn hungry. And all the while she can only look at him with that strange, lax smile beneath wavering, worried eyes. "Caleb, I don't... What are you talking about?" It's too much. Every word, every wrinkle that shapes them. She lies while he starves, driving him to the dirt, to the worms. His fist finds the wall again, sending a blaze through his knuckles. Whether the break is in the plaster or his hand matters little. "I have to get out of here." He says something vile, what exactly he could never recall, and passes her by in a storm. Before she can think to follow, he is opening the front door and passing into the twilight. Anger only warms for so long, and Caleb is not dressed for the cold. He had not expected to leave his grotto for... well, he had not expected it. The wind blows in reed-thin strands that siphon heat and marrow, numbing the fingers like fishing line pulled taut. There's glass in his lungs, a crawling in his guts. He has forgotten just how hateful the world is. He shudders against it. The high street, he thinks, and takes the turn. He has not walked it for some time, but the route is etched into his plimsolls, and soon enough the breeze carries with it the unmistakable taste of oil and coinage. Drunkards and hens mill in a miasma around the Technicolor roads, fast foods flickering red and yellow from yawning glass mouths. Inside, gaggles eat as they are eaten. It turns his stomach even as it growls. Chips, Caleb decides, and begins to shuffle towards a familiar silhouette. Fries King, or King of Fries, one of those names as memorable as it is witty. That is to say, neither. The entrance gives a weak ring that is almost immediately drowned by the hinges' squeal, and a wall of smoke and scent meets him like a paddle. Grease and oil and sweat and steel, too solid to be appetizing, like huffing concrete. He would vomit if there were anything for his stomach to dredge. Large, and a battered sausage, he mutters to the broad, coarse man behind the counter. No, wait. 2. Wordless, the man begins his task. The scoop, glittering beneath the heat lamps, scissors through the golden ridges like liquid butter, cracking the golden shells to reveal their sweet, white creams. Vinegar browns the air, dark as ichor, toasting the sausage batter the color of the summer sun. An age passes as Caleb watches the food funneled from its bassinets to the white paper sheets, bound with such care. By the time the package is in his hands, it is already sodden, the bone white giving way to grey-green pocks, where the grease pools its worst. He has never been so hungry. Dinner, the teller grunts, already returning to his forge. Caleb thrusts a hand into his pocket and grabs a handful of something. Receipts and coppers, he suspects, but he scatters them across the counter all the same and is out the door before the man can discover just how short his change is. Back to the chill, Caleb clutches the parcel in his hands like a dying ember and huddles his way to a side street. He would prefer to retreat to his bed, but by now his father would be home. It doesn't bear thinking about. He finds a corner where the gutters run with mulch rather than students and tucks himself away. Old, cold water leaches through the seat of his shorts, gravel nibbling at his bare skin like minnows. Above, the stars choke on mists, gemstones on the ocean floor. The steam of his meal soon joins them, as he tears into the parchment like a wild cat to a fawn. Batter buttercups bloom. He grabs a handful, hardly feeling the blisters they raise, and gulps them down. The molten chips burst, dragging layer after layer of cheek and tongue with them as he swallows. The salt sows the furrows they leave, the pain a delicacy. This is it, he thinks, grasping the first of the sausages and cleaving it between his teeth. This is what I needed. And then comes the squirming. Caleb frowns. He is not sure what quite gives him pause. His mouth is numb with scalding, and he hardly feels the shower of starchy fluff as it tumbles down his throat. But maybe that's it. It isn't going down. Not all of it. He swallows hard, His throat grinds against itself, tectonic, sending shakes throughout his body. Most of the clump follows it, bulging its way down his chest, before coming to rest as a coal in the pit of his stomach. And yet there remains a wriggling. Caleb coughs. He snorts. He swallows and spits and gags. He curls his tongue to the soft palate and feels for the sticklers. All the while there is a pressing in his throat, a gentle undulation. Allergies, he thinks as he works a finger between his lips. That is the cheap crap they fry this stuff in. Scalping from the working man. Can't even... Something catches his nail and falls into his palm. Something stark. Something warm. Something fat. Something alive. Caleb lurches to his feet, sending the maggot to the weeds in a shower of chips and expletives. His hand finds his grease-stained lips and burrows, shoving his tongue aside as his fingers claw at the mound in his throat. They fall like sleet. The larvae heads bubble grotesquely, red and yellow, mandibles chittering beneath slate, thoughtless eyes. Their legs scrabble for perches on his teeth as they fall, and so he bites, bursting their boil-like bodies into pulp, before spitting them free. They taste of salt and vinegar. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, Caleb moans, the words a blur. He staggers from his corner, bleary-eyed and half-mad, and falls to his knees. One jars against a grate, a rusted iron thing with a gap-toothed smile, packed with filth. Water pools at its lips, swimming with mites and sticks. He doesn't care. Snatching more than cupping, he gulps hand over hand, until the flood has gone from lake to pond to dregs, and his mouth tastes only of mud. Filthy, filthy, filthy! Flies in his storeroom, maggots in his meat. The scum bring in their rot, putting it in our food, frying them plump and leaking and... But that doesn't make sense. Caleb stands, his chest tight, his head light. There's stardust behind his eyes as he staggers to the spot where his dinner landed. It's with the woodlice now, the dandelions all aglitter with spit and batter shavings. And the maggots, of course. Seeing them so stark against the dark stone fills his skull with briars, his teeth with needles. Filthy, scratchy. He picks up a discarded bottle. There are plenty to go around, and uses the neck to prod at the food's remains. There's a bog of the things congealing where he spat, and a few more cooking in the mass. But not enough. They were inside the chips, they had to be. There were too many for it not to be an infestation. Reluctantly, he plucks the furthest wedge he can from the grubs, and splits it open. Nothing strange. He grabs another. Nothing. And another, and another. In each there is only the soft white innards, steaming in the twilight cold. No sign of rot or infection. Like they just... An awful thought occurs, but Caleb pushes it aside. He's starving. He needs to wash out the taste, fill his belly, forget the ants and the maggots and the mother and the man. Kicking the paper carcass aside, Caleb wavers his way out of the alley where moon has fallen and the crowds are out in force. For once he is grateful. It makes what comes next that much easier. He chooses his mark, a corner shop with one too many patrons and too few watchful eyes. He slinks in so much as he can and, while a clerk releases Captain Morgan to the charge of a boy with more acne scars than GCSEs, pockets the first sealed bag he sees. It is not hidden well, but no one looks too long or too hard. They never have. Caleb takes his prize to a small bench across the way and examines it. A bag of chicken-flavoured crisps shine a dull gold beneath the street lights. He turns it over, checks the date, the bulge that betrays the gases that keep the things light and crunchy. No perforations, no tears. He opens the bag, starting slightly at the pop it gives. The smell is all-encompassing, the scent of chemical meat, of faux flesh, of something live picked apart and reconstituted to the barest ash of its taste. His mouth waters. Even still, he takes a moment to ruffle through the ruffles like folio pages, checking for dark, scampering shapes. He finds none. Satisfied, he slips a crisp between his molars, letting it soak and crumble. A ritual. His mother always did the same. When the last of the thing has wasted away, he takes more, a handful this time, and crunches. Like glass they shatter. Starch stalactites, painful, good. The bag is plump, more so than he's ever seen, endless. Though his hand crusts and tongue burns, there is no sign of silver, only hand over hand of golden, toasted browns. He's drooling, he realizes. It's running in a viscous waterfall over cheek and chin. Between mouthfuls, he scrubs a palm across his face to clear it, before returning it to the bag. Only, what trickles in the gutters of his palm is not saliva. It is much too thick, much too yellow. His jaw slows. Oh God! For the first time he tastes the taste beneath the taste, beneath the chicken stink and carbon, the sourness that grows stronger with every crunch. And it isn't just a crunch, no, he fights to think of a word other than squelching. Please, no. And then he vomits. Great gussets, flame and formaldehyde, spitting like dragon's breath to the streets. The squeals of passers-by are drowned out by the screaming in his head and the hiss of the roaches that spatter from between his lips. Their bodies scarred with toothy indentations, weeping pus-yellow innards. It was clear they weren't in the bag. How could they have been in the bag? Bloody hell, mate, where have you been in it? Laughs a red-faced geezer, clutching a styrofoam box as he skips drunkenly over the ever-growing pond. Found the one place not cutting the kegs with piss. One pointing us their way. He laughs again, too far gone to be disgusted. From his hands, Donna's steam wafts. What roaches are intact enough to move are already scurrying towards it. Caleb beats them to it, snatching the box from the man's hands to a chorus of cursing. He shovels lamb and spice and whatever sickly sweet sauces drown them both. This time he hardly gets a swallow before the crawling begins, and what could only be earthworms, wet with fresh clod, are filling his cavities. This can't be happening. He doesn't get a chance to excavate. Without warning, the drunk's ham-hock fist arcs from the shadows and connects. His cheek sparks. The crack follows in thunder peals a half-second later. But that is a second too late. Caleb falls, and before a head meets concrete, he is with the nightmares. The bitch is at the door again. In his head again. Knocking nails into his skull. No, not nails. Hurts too much. Something worse. He read once about a man who survived a railroad spike through his jaw. Yes, that seems more like it. Someone lost a spike in his face. Mum, probably. Be just like her. Mr. Moore, how we doing this morning? A woman, but not his mother. Caleb finds that stranger than he should. He tries to grunt a reply, but the pain. His bones, white as phosphorus, burn cold. Oh dear, the voice tuts. Try not to move, love. You've a broken jaw. His eyes open and are greeted by the alkaline sting of a hospital ward. He's been flayed to the skin and seated upright beneath flimsy paper sheets, a draft creeping on spider legs up his bare neck. A woman flutters about him. She's fussing with some kind of wooden board attachment, wrestling it into an aluminium strut that arcs over his waist. I'm sorry, love, she grunts as the board clicks into place. You've woken up just in time for the unpleasant part. He's suddenly aware of a pressure in his nose. Not painful, at least not by comparison, but there is an undeniable weight to the bridge, an aching squeeze that leads down into his... No. He wants to scream it, but the pain swallows the sound. He wants to bat her away, but his fingers are deaf to his pleas. He wants to kick and claw as she readies the feeding, prepares the pump that will fill his guts with earwigs and dragonflies and termites and ticks and fat, needle-nosed mosquitoes that will suckle at his intestines and grow fatter still until he is drowning in his own stolen blood. Now this might feel a bit strange, so bear with me, okay? Just relax. But Caleb does not. He strains against himself, his muscle bonds and tendon shackles. He fights to chew out the plastic tube that has been fed through his sinuses to dangle like a second uvula. Move, 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 move. And something gives. The blood is flowing again, and some feeling returns to his right bicep. Less than a quiver, but it is all he needs as the nurse reaches closer. Move! He swings. His hand is still limp, but that lends it a hideous force as it flicks like a bullwhip at the underside of the nurse's temple. A heady thock sound rings through the ward as it connects, and she wavers, totters. Her eyes, blue shadows beneath swaying lamplight, twitch and shudder. Then she falls. Caleb has no time for shame. With still, numb fingers he bats at his face. A few blows land across his swollen jaw with agony so intense he almost ceases to feel them, until finally his index hooks beneath the feeding tube. It's held in place with an adhesive tape, and takes a few seconds of sweat ease straining to yank free. The pain is hideous, chili pepper viscera, but the blood tastes of ecstasy. I didn't eat. The bugs can't get me if I don't eat. But it isn't enough. Somewhere in the hospital bowels a wail is sounding, and orderly feet are knocking over the tile to his door. They'll tie him down. They'll make him do it. Unless... He looks across the room to a low sink, weeping in the corner. A mirror hangs above it, a large crack grinning with plaster teeth from its face. It cuts him, though not enough to disguise the damage. He looks like a portrait by an old master, grown tired of the human shape and ready to see just how far it can stretch. Bulbous and broken, blue and black and bulging, but not near broken enough. There is still some shape to his nose, and his bloated lips still betray his greying teeth. A month, maybe 2, and all will be back in its place. No. Caleb stands. Beneath him the mattress shifts like ice on a spring lake, his head swimming with brown blood. He holds gaze with the mirror until the crease of its apex takes his eyes. It leaves only the shattered grimace, now fixed into a mask of certain, steady resolve. Fall. The door slams open a moment too late. The last thing he sees before the tile takes him is a pale-faced nurse, a doctor with a hand pressed to her mouth, and his mother, smiling that strange, lax smile. Splish, splash. Splish, splash. There is only the dark and the slow. All the world has gone to treacle, warm as liquid sunbeams, thick as sleepless death. Caleb tries to think through it all, but he finds he cannot recall enough of himself to begin. He falls back to the treacle. Splish, splash. Splish, splash. Not dark. Not light either, but this time it is with a certainty not dark. Caleb shudders in the grey gloom and realizes with some small pride that he now knows his name and his task. Did I do it? He is too numb to be sure. He tries once again to raise a hand to his face, but the only answer is the faintest twitch and the ring of steel. They handcuffed me to the bed. That much he had expected after what he did to the nurse, but she should have listened. Though he hadn't said a word, she should have known something was wrong. It was her job to know. If he could have spoken, could have told her that she couldn't make him eat, that there would be no more way out for them, that they would find their nests and hives inside him. The feeding tube their all-making mother, their ever-spawning father. He had to stop her, and stop her he did. Whatever work they did after his second fall, they did it well. His head feels twice its usual size, and not only from the swelling. From what little he can catch in his peripheral, something has been wound about his face, gauze maybe, or plaster. Whatever it is, it has been cast layer after layer over his mouth, his nose, every inch of flesh aside from a thin sliver where his eyes peer through. Caleb swallows. He feels nothing in his throat. I did it. No feeding tube. He could weep with relief. No need to fear the crawlies and the creepers, the droners and the flutterers. He can finally sleep. Splish, splash. Splish, splash. If it weren't for that sound, what is that? Like a fish on a line shaking the last of the water from its scales. That patter on the surface, the countdown to oblivion. Splish, splash. Splish, splash. He tries to crane his neck, but something has him bolted in place. Or perhaps he is more hurt than he thinks. What is that? A bedpan filling? His own, maybe? He shakes again, trying to suss out any feelings of cold iron on his bare back. And then he freezes. He feels it. Not a bedpan, no. Something higher. On his arm. Something thin and plastic and pulling at his skin. An IV. Of course they wouldn't leave me to starve. Of course they put one in. Desperation mounts and Caleb rocks, twisting every way he can against the restraints at his wrists, the restraints of his own body. He rocks and bends and groans, but the orderlies have learned from their mistakes, and he is caught so fast. Because an IV carries nutrients, sustenance, the barest, simplest shadow of food. Splish splash, splish splash. Dawn is breaking now, the mists of early morning peeling away in raw, bloody strands, dyeing the walls the pink of shepherds and sailors. The light is blinding, but not merciful. It does not shroud everything, nor do the tears Caleb begins to shed. Oh, Jesus! Beside his bed is a tall, thin stand. It glimmers clinically in the daybreak glow, shining like a raised sword by torchlight. Around it curls a narrow plastic tube, perfectly clear. It runs the length of the pole in a cursive hand from a point beginning somewhere in the pit of Caleb's left elbow. From there it leads up, and up and up, to a translucent plastic bag hanging from a small hook. Inside is about a quarter-liter of clear liquid, and inside the liquid, Caleb has never seen one in person. Plenty of times on television, of course, on those survivor shows or documentary supercuts maybe. Their legs flickering like licks of fire, their segmented bodies gleaming like bronze armor, their jaws twitching like guillotine blades. Splish splash, splish splash. Inside the IV bag, a centipede writhes. It curls like a serpent, snaps like a vice. Its dozen upon dozens of legs clawing at the plastic, at him. This isn't fair, Caleb thinks, animal terror refusing to let him look away. I did all I could. The centipede gives no answer. Rather, it seems to decide there is no escape from the bag itself. So it turns in the fluid, angling its antennae down, 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 down. Its many legs clench as it drags itself in slow, steady strokes towards the filter at the bag's bottom, to the hole that leads to the line that leads to him. From the bed, Caleb Moore watches, mummified, as a many-legged bones creeps from plastic into flesh, and tries in vain to scream. This episode was produced by Louisa Jane and written and narrated by M.L. Richards. This episode, I would like to thank you, the listener, for making it through what is probably the most grotesque thing I will ever write. Sorry about that. Enjoy your supper. Follow our socials in the show notes. And thank you for listening. Until next time, good night, North Star.